before I got on that plane that my spirit was telling me, don't get on this plane.
He was not a box office superstar, not the million-dollar face of Hollywood, but Richard Lawson carried within him stories more chilling than any script he ever played. A veteran who once smelled blood on the battlefields of Vietnam. A rare survivor of a plane crash that claimed dozens of lives. An actor who walked in Poltergeist, a film surrounded by rumors of a curse. And a man who held in his heart a 32-year love for Beyoncé's mother before finally confessing it publicly. Fame did not save him from depression. The spotlight could not erase the panic attacks, and even the late happiness with the woman he loved collapsed in a divorce filing. Richard Lawson, a name that seldom appeared in big headlines, yet every secret revealed about him left the public stunned. For this was not only the journey of an actor, but the struggle of a survivor, one who always kept moving forward after nearly breaking down. Before he stood in front of the camera, he had stood on the brink of life and death. It was those brutal experiences that turned Richard Lawson into a symbol of resilience, a Hollywood legend in the shadows. But what is Richard Lawson's biggest secret? What makes his life one of Hollywood's greatest shocks? And why to this day does that name remain unforgettable? Death within inches. To understand why Richard Lawson is called Hollywood's survivor, we must go back to one night in March 1992, the moment when he was only a few breaths away from death. That day, Lawson was on U.S. Air Flight 405, departing from LaGuardia Airport, New York. The sky was shrouded in fog, the runway coated in ice. Just minutes after takeoff, the plane began to sway, then suddenly plunged into the freezing waters of Flushing Bay. The roar of the engines merged with the sound of metal snapping apart, followed by suffocating darkness. Out of 51 passengers and crew 27 never returned. Richard Lawson, by an almost illogical twist of fate, was among the 24 who miraculously survived. At that moment he was trapped in the wreckage, his seatbelt cutting across his abdomen. Water and jet fuel flooded into his lungs, choking him, his chest tightening as if it would burst. In that desperate instant, Lawson thought it's over. Yet survival instinct refused to let him surrender. Summoning the last of his strength, he twisted his body, unfastened the belt, and by some miracle found a small pocket of air to breathe. Moments later, he crawled out of the shattered fuselage, breaking through the icy surface, shivering, but alive. This miraculous survival story became even more chilling when tied to the film that defined his career, Poltergeist 1982. That classic was not only famous for its horror plot, but also for the string of real-life tragedies that convinced many of a curse. Two of Lawson's young co-stars, Dominique Dunne and Heather O'Rourke, died suddenly under tragic circumstances. One murdered the other from a rare illness at just 12 years old. Amid such losses, Lawson's escape from an air disaster seemed almost unbelievable. For many, it was proof of the so-called poltergeist curse. Richard Lawson saw it differently. He did not believe in sinister fate, nor did he blame any supernatural force. He quietly said he was simply a lucky man. Yet looking back, the deaths of his young co-stars while he survived such a catastrophe only made Richard Lawson's name more mysterious, as if Hollywood itself had chosen him to continue the story of an immortal survivor. When the actor confessed he had PTSD after miraculously surviving the U.S. Air Flight 405 crash in 1992, a tragedy that took 27 lives and left only 24 passengers alive, Richard Lawson thought he had beaten fate. He walked out of the twisted wreckage soaking wet, gasping for air yet still breathing. People called it a miracle, and Lawson himself thought, "I have defeated the Grim Reaper." But he was wrong. The Reaper had not gone. It had merely changed its way of attacking. In the days after the accident, Lawson believed everything would be fine. He returned to sets, continued reading scripts, showed up at auditions as if nothing had happened. Yet inside him was a different battlefield, an invisible war that Hollywood lights could not illuminate. The plane crash awakened all the obsessions from his past, things Lawson had tried to bury for years, the blood-soaked memories of the Vietnam battlefield. Remember, before he was an actor, Richard Lawson was a Marine medic. He served nearly 2 years in Southeast Asia, witnessing the deaths of comrades, bandaging the wounded amid bombing and surviving fierce artillery barrages. Wounded in one engagement, Lawson was awarded the Purple Heart, a decoration for American service members injured in the line of duty. For many veterans, that medal is a source of pride. For Lawson, it was also an unerasable reminder you survived, while many others did not return. The years of war left him with smoldering wounds, Lawson admitted he often dreamed of comrades collapsing beside him, dreamed of thunderous explosions, then woke up jolting in cold sweat. But like many returning soldiers, he chose silence, burying everything to carry on living. Then the 1992 plane crash acted like fuel poured on a spark, turning haunting images into a flood that washed away the calm Lawson had spent years building. The climax came in 1994. During what should have been an ordinary audition, Richard Lawson stepped into the casting room. He read a few lines, and suddenly everything around him blurred. Cold sweat poured from his brow. His ears rang the director's voice echoed as if from a distant place. His heart raced pounding. His body trembled. Lawson stood there, unable to speak a single word. In front of the director, he froze powerless, as if his life force had been drained. That was his first panic attack, the moment that marked the outbreak of PTSD he had carried from the battlefield, now pushed to the limit after the plane crash. That moment struck the hardest blow to his career. How can an actor who cannot open his mouth to read lines, who cannot control his own body, continue to stand on stage or in front of a camera? Lawson realized he was falling into an abyss. So in 1994, he decided to disappear from Hollywood. At first, he thought he only needed a few months' rest. The cruel reality was that the silence lasted 5 years. During that period, Richard Lawson almost completely withdrew from public life. Fans and colleagues wondered why had the familiar face from Dynasty and Poltergeist suddenly vanished. No one had an answer. Only years later did Lawson speak up to admit he had to face depression, panic, and invisible fears every day. In those 5 years, he ended a toxic relationship, one that only deepened his emotional wounds. He threw himself into therapy, learned to confront the nightmare, and began to accept that he was ill and needed healing. It was a painful journey, but also the turning point that saved his life. "If I had not stopped," Lawson said in an interview, "I might be dead." Those words silenced Hollywood. A seasoned black actor, once praised for his strength and dignity, now admitted he had nearly been defeated by his own mind. In an industry where glamour is always painted over, and mental collapse is seen as weakness, Richard Lawson's confession carried special weight. He broke the silence around PTSD, especially for men of color who once wore military uniforms. He showed that stage lights can hide many things, but never the darkness within the mind. That 5-year disappearance led audiences to think Lawson was finished. But in truth, it was the time that saved him, allowing him to return, not just as an actor, but as a survivor once more. Once on the battlefield. Once in the plane crash, and this time from the abyss within his own soul. Tricky Dick, the repressed darkness unleashed. Hollywood has always built legends with glamorous stories. But Richard Lawson was different. He was unafraid to expose a secret few in the industry dared admit he existed in two selves. One was Richard Lawson, refined, disciplined, polished. The other was Tricky Dick, a rebellious, dark alter ego ready to swallow every moral boundary for the sake of a role. And it was this haunting duality that became the key to making him one of Hollywood's most unique faces. Richard Lawson entered Hollywood through a narrow door. In 1971, he first appeared in the blockbuster Dirty Harry. But it was only such a minor role that audiences could hardly remember, and his name was absent from the credits. Yet that shadowy start became his ticket to begin. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Lawson steadily climbed through small roles. Scream Blackula, Scream 1973, The Main Event, 1979 Streets of Fire, 1984. Each appearance left a faint but firm mark. It wasn't until he moved into television that Lawson truly found his ground. In Dynasty 1986, 1987, he played Nick Kimball, followed by Lucas Barnes in All My Children, 1992-1994. On the small screen, Richard Lawson came across as a calm, confident gentleman, exactly the archetype audiences trusted. But that was only the surface. The milestone that etched Lawson into public memory was Poltergeist 1982. He played Ryan, a calm yet sharp paranormal researcher. The horror film quickly became a global phenomenon, listed among the scariest works of the 1980s. Yet along with fame, Poltergeist brought chilling real-life tragedies. Dominique Dunne was murdered shortly after the film's release. Heather O'Rourke died suddenly at age 12 from medical complications, and Lawson himself narrowly escaped death in the 1992 U.S. Air Flight 405 crash. The media called it the Poltergeist curse. To audiences, Lawson was no longer just an actor, he was the man who walked out of a haunted film and carried the curse into real life. After everything, Richard Lawson confessed something that stunned many fans: he did not have just one face. Behind the gentlemanly image was always a second alter ego, Tricky Dick. In rare interviews, Lawson spoke of Tricky Dick as if it were a demon inside him. Another Richard, reckless, defiant, willing to do what others would not. When he needed to play a villain, Lawson simply opened the door for Tricky Dick to emerge. He did not pretend. He did not act. He used his own darkness to make characters terrifyingly real. That is why Lawson's villains always left audiences both mesmerized and chilled to the bone. You cannot truly understand a villain if you have never dared to look into the darkness within yourself, Lawson once said. And for him, Tricky Dick was precisely that darkness. This revelation caused a storm. Fans were used to seeing Richard Lawson on red carpets beside Tina Knowles, smiling brightly next to Beyoncé, or as the dedicated mentor at Richard Lawson Studios. No one expected that behind the polished smile was a rebellious persona ready to mine the darkest corners of himself and turn them into artistic power. For many fans, it was a disillusionment, but for those within the craft, it was a shockwave. Lawson dared to say what many actors only buried: that art comes not only from light, but also from confronting the darkness within. It was thanks to Tricky Dick that Lawson kept his edge with age. In his 70s, when many colleagues had retired, he continued to embody villains with ferocity. In the series Beauty in Black 2023, Lawson shocked viewers by portraying a ruthless, psychologically complex villain that lingered in their minds. When asked about the secret to keeping the fire alive, Lawson only smiled: "I let Tricky Dick do the work." A brief reply, yet it revealed a grim truth: Richard Lawson never denied the darkness inside him. He chose to live with it, turning it into a weapon. Looking back over his career, it is clear Richard Lawson was the product of two men. One Richard Lawson, calm, polished, the gentleman of the screen, and one Tricky Dick, rebellious, dark, the force that made his villains so frighteningly real. It was this duality that made Lawson one of a kind. He was Hollywood's gentleman, yet also the dangerous man within his own mind. And perhaps not his roles in Dynasty or All My Children, not even the landmark Poltergeist, but Tricky Dick himself may be the greatest secret, the one that set Richard Lawson apart and made him immortal on screen. The darkness of drugs, an actor's first fall. Before Richard Lawson became the gentleman of the screen with a refined presence on American television, he carried a stain he rarely mentioned, a stain tied to the white powder that once haunted all of Hollywood: cocaine. In the mid-1970s, Hollywood was not only the capital of cinema, but also the playground of party culture. All-night parties glowed under disco lights with strong liquor cocktails, laughter laced with smoke, and cocaine regarded as the key to enter the artistic world. For a young actor to find a place, he had to play like everyone else or risk being pushed aside. At the time, Richard Lawson was just a young face, struggling to find his footing in a brutal Hollywood. He walked through glamorous but cold parties, where every glance was a test, and success sometimes depended more on fitting in than on talent. In those rooms, cocaine stood as an invitation: either accept and belong or refuse and be left behind. For Lawson, curiosity and pressure led him astray. In 1976, the fateful fall came. Richard Lawson was arrested by California police for cocaine possession. For an unknown young actor, the shock was nothing less than a career sentence. The news spread quickly in the community, and chilling whispers followed him. In Hollywood, every mistake was magnified, and for a black man, the price was even harsher. The 1970s had not yet shaken off the weight of racial prejudice. A young black actor without a reputation yet caught in drugs, it was a formula for being branded forever. Friends from that time recalled Lawson was truly devastated. Casting doors slammed shut at the mere mention of his name. Young directors whispered, "That guy's into cocaine, he's not reliable." From a beginner trying to enter the craft, he was suddenly pushed back to the starting line. It was the kind of moment that would make many quit, but Lawson chose to wake up. He gradually cut out all-night parties, distanced himself from toxic circles, and poured all his energy into acting. Drugs nearly stole his career, but that fall became the drive for Lawson to prove he was not disposable. The experience of 1976 left him with an invisible scar, teaching him that Hollywood never forgives weakness. One slip, and you can lose everything. And if you are a black actor, the chance of coming back is nearly impossible. Yet Lawson did it. He learned to build a calm, refined image, a screen gentleman, to cover his reckless past. Few could imagine that behind that poise had once been a naive, impulsive young man easily lured by temptation. Audiences knew him from Poltergeist Dynasty, All My Children, but almost no one knew that Lawson's file contained a dark night in 1976. Hollywood does not like to revisit the stains of those who have redeemed themselves, and Lawson never used it as a dramatic anecdote for his career. And yet, looking back, that fall stands as the strongest proof Richard Lawson survived not only death, but also the darkness of drugs, a darkness that swallowed many talents of his time. The secret of cocaine in 1976 is rarely spoken of, but it is a crucial piece in understanding him. It explains why, when faced with war with PTSD with a plane crash, he could still rise again, because he had once already lost everything and learned how to be reborn from the dark. Richard Lawson, Hollywood's survivor, escaped not only death, but also the downfall of his own youth. And it is this secret that makes his gentleman of the screen image fiercer scarred, but more unyielding than anyone else. A 32-year love with Tina Knowles, the most shocking romantic twist of Lawson's life. If the 1992 plane crash made Richard Lawson Hollywood's survivor, then his 32-year hidden love story with Tina Knowles, Beyoncé's mother, made audiences exclaim, "Unbelievable." It all began in the 1980s. At the time, Tina Knowles was a young woman pregnant with Beyoncé, living with her husband Matthew Knowles in Houston. Richard Lawson had just stepped into Hollywood, struggling to make a name for himself. They met through Gwen, Lawson's sister and Tina's close friend. At a casual gathering, Richard admitted he had fallen at first sight. But since Tina was already settled with a family, that feeling could only be buried in his heart. For 32 years, Lawson kept that secret to himself. He never told Tina, nor revealed it to anyone else. He watched from afar as Destiny's Child rose to fame, then saw Beyoncé become a global superstar. He carried on with his life, marrying and raising children, but in his heart the feeling for Tina never faded. In 2011, Tina Knowles officially divorced Matthew Knowles. A few years later, Lawson was also single. This time, fate gave them a second chance. They reconnected, then went public with their relationship in 2013. Just 2 years later, on April 12, 2015, their dream wedding took place on a yacht in Newport Beach, California. All guests wore white, from Beyoncé and Solange to their close family. American media called it one of the most luxurious and romantic weddings of the year. What shocked the public was Lawson's revelation he had loved Tina since their first meeting, kept it hidden for 32 years, and only now confessed it. "You are one of the most beautiful women I've ever met. At that time, you were pregnant with Beyoncé and had a husband, so my feelings could only remain in dreams. But I never stopped thinking about you," Lawson wrote in an anniversary post. That confession turned their romance into one of Hollywood's most surprising love secrets. Becoming Tina Knowles' husband also meant Lawson officially became the stepfather of Beyoncé and Solange. The relationship once sent shockwaves through international media. He wasn't from the music industry, yet suddenly became part of the most powerful music family in the world. Images of Richard Lawson standing alongside Beyoncé and Solange on red carpets made many wonder what was life like for a veteran actor stepping into a superstar family. The truth was, Richard Lawson blended in naturally. He didn't try to be the center of attention, instead choosing to be a strong husband for Tina and a kind stepfather for her famous daughters. Bianca Lawson, his biological daughter, also became sisters with Beyoncé and Solange. Although 2 years older than Beyoncé, Bianca was the younger stepsister in the family. Interestingly, Lawson's son Ricky Lawson contributed to Beyoncé's Renaissance 2022 album. It was a curious connection of love and career that made the Lawson-Knowles family a constant topic in the press. Yet the fairy tale did not have a perfect ending. In July 2023, Tina Knowles unexpectedly filed for divorce from Richard Lawson after 8 years of marriage. The news shocked the public, as just months earlier, they had appeared radiant together at events. In her memoir, Matriarch, published in 2025, Tina revealed the reason she felt the marriage no longer gave her the joy and respect she deserved. It was a difficult decision, but necessary for her to find happiness again. Richard Lawson remained composed. He did not attack, argue, or complain, only sharing briefly that while his heart could still be hurt, he respected Tina's decision. They maintained a friendship, continuing to support each other on important occasions. For Lawson, having lived openly with a love hidden for 32 years and sharing 8 years of happy marriage, was already a great gift that fate had given him. His biological daughter, Hollywood's secret star. But the shocks surrounding Richard Lawson were not limited to Battlefield's plane crashes or his hidden romance with Tina Knowles. The real secret lay within his own family, where bloodlines and music intertwined into a web so peculiar it left Hollywood speechless. Bianca Lawson, his biological daughter born in 1979, was the first proof. From her teenage years, she pursued acting, building her career independently without leaning on her father's shadow. Global audiences came to know Bianca through legendary series like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Vampire Diaries, and Teen Wolf. The name Bianca Lawson stood firmly on its own in the entertainment world, with many not even realizing she was Richard Lawson's daughter. Then came the twist when Richard married Tina Knowles in 2015. Suddenly, Bianca became Beyoncé and Solange's stepsister. Yet in reality, Bianca was 2 years older than Beyoncé. An odd paradox, older by age but officially the younger stepsister by family ties. In a world already accustomed to bizarre storylines, this situation was enough to send entertainment media into a frenzy. The connection did not stop there. Ricky Lawson, Richard's son born in 1992, chose music instead of acting. He became a songwriter and producer. And fate came full circle when Ricky contributed to none other than Beyoncé's Renaissance 2022 album. A perfect family twist, Richard Lawson's biological son making music for his stepsister Beyoncé, who was in turn his elder stepsister in name. Both Bianca and Ricky have kept low profiles, avoiding scandal and refraining from flaunting their connections. Bianca rarely mentions Beyoncé in interviews, yet many close sources confirm they are genuinely close. Beyoncé herself once praised Mr. Richard in her eyes as a warm stepfather who always supported the family. What made the story sensational was how Richard Lawson managed to keep all these overlapping relationships smooth. In Hollywood, where your kids, my kids, our kids often leads to drama. Lawson transformed it into a harmonious household. He turned age gaps, family ranks, and the complications of past marriages into a unique family tale. From the outside, people only saw the glamour, a veteran actor standing beside Tina Knowles, part of a star-studded clan. But once the secrets were revealed, audiences realized Richard Lawson was not just an actor, not just a survivor. He was the axis of one of the most extraordinary artistic families in Hollywood, where bloodlines and music interwove in surprising, tangled, yet ultimately respectful and loving ways. Richard Lawson's true legacy, a philosophy of survival. Richard Lawson did not only leave behind films, performances, or shocking romances. He left something far more valuable, a philosophy of life carved from his own falls and resurrections. He once said that life is not a chain of random luck, but a process in which one must learn to receive, transform, and move forward. Every moment, every choice, even every mistake can become the foundation for rebirth if one dares to confront and overcome it. What mattered most was that Lawson did not keep this philosophy to himself. He chose to turn it into action, into a living legacy through teaching, mentoring, and inspiring others. His students did not only learn acting, they learned to connect with their inner selves, to turn pain into strength, to stand firm even when everything seemed to collapse. For this reason, what Lawson left behind reached far beyond the screen. When Hollywood remembers him, they will not only recall Poltergeist or Dynasty, but also a man who walked through the depths of darkness and came back stronger, clearer. The sensational stories around his life, from drugs, accidents, PTSD, to a 3-decade-long love, were only the outer shell. The true essence of Lawson's shock lies in this. He showed the world that survival is not merely existing, but turning survival into the strength to continue. Richard Lawson closed his life's journey as a wounded soldier, a strict teacher and artist who once fell, but rose again. And above all, a survivor who transformed every adversity into a symphony of resilience. For audiences, the greatest shock was not any scandal revealed, but the simple truth that a human being can endure so much, overcome it all, and still walk on as if never defeated. Richard Lawson showed the world sometimes the greatest secret is not a scandal, but the strength to survive and move forward. If you feel this story inspires you, please like the video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment. Which of Richard Lawson's secrets shocked you the most? I'll read them all and reply to the best ones.